All right. Good evening, folks. Thanks for tuning in to our Southern Rut Report here with another onX webinar. We're going to give folks just a couple minutes to jump into the webinar here to catch this Southern Rut Report. I'm actually reporting from Texas. I'm over in Abilene. We're going to kick it off with Austin Delano, Mossy Oak Pro. I don't know, Austin, how long have you been at Mossy Oak? Long time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. 15, 16 years now.
Heck yeah. And what's kind of your forte, your specialty there with the Mossy Oak crew?
So I've been for 15, 16 years now, been with our Biologic and Gamekeeper brands. Running R&D on our Biologic seed and fertilizers and all that good stuff that we put together for the wildlife management world. And then obviously our Gamekeeper brand with the magazine we put out and our TV show and just helping with content and everything on our Gamekeeper brand. So kind of depends on what day it is and what time of year it is, but no shortage of things to do.
Right on. All right, so we're getting quite a few folks in here, so we'll kind of kick it off. I'll clean up or take care of some housekeeping here, and then we'll get into it as far as what all these folks are seeing across the South as far as rut activity and some of their tactics that they're using over the next couple weeks here to get it done and fill a freezer. So everybody's cameras and mics are off. So you don't need to worry if your kids are yelling in the background or that type of thing. There's a chat and a QA on the bottom of your screen. Chat's a great place to throw in what you've been seeing and where you're at with your rut activity. And then the Q&A is a great spot too. If you want to ask Austin or Jeff or any of these future guests a question, or they say something that you want a little bit more explanation on, feel free to throw that in the Q&A, and I'll do my best to make sure that I'm checking that Q&A and relaying those questions. There's also going to be a giveaway. We're going to be giving away some onX hats towards the end of the webinar. So if you stick around, they'll only be available for giveaway for folks that are still in attendance for the webinar. And outside of that, please just be cordial. We're all just here to hopefully gain a little insight and punch tag here over the next couple of weeks. So with that, Austin, tell us kind of where you're at as far as hunting in the country, and then give us some background on your experience and where you're hunting, kind of when that peak rut is and what you're seeing this year as compared to what's typical.
Yeah. So let me preface by saying I live in the very northwest corner of Alabama, and there is no other state that I know of that has more different defined ruts than the state of Alabama. I mean, you can go to the southern part and hunt February, a little bit further north of January, and then, up here where we're at, it's early December. So all depends on what part of the state you live in. But up here in the northwest corner, typically starting in the first week of December is when stuff really starts to pick up. And I hunt just across the line in southern Tennessee on a couple of leases I have, and it's relatively about the same thing. I'll look for about that 5th of December for things to really get rocking and rolling and see some 4+ year old, deer on their feet making some mistakes. The better the weather is, the earlier we see some of that take place, the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th of December. I've killed some really older deer in that time period, but the majority of them that I've caught slipping have been more 15th through 20th type time period. And so looking at historical data and hunting these areas for 20+ years, this is the 2 weeks I'm going to take off. If I'm going to take off some time here and there, is the next 2 weeks. And that's when it gets right. And a lot of people, and I'm talking about a lot of people, have texted me, emailed me the last few days that are in this general area and be like, why am I not seeing any buck sign? Is the rut going to be late? I don't really myself think of anything as being a late rut. It's going to be, when are you seeing activity? Stuff has been really rotten weather the last week for sure. Warm, rainy. The deer are still going to do their thing. Is the conditions right for you to see them? If it's 70 degrees and pouring down rain, I'm not near as likely to see a target buck 4+ years old that I'm after than if it was 30 and raining. It's just not the same condition. So you gotta measure things based off the conditions you're hunting in. So I checked cameras all day a couple of days ago, and then spent the afternoon checking a couple more today. And in that 5-day gap, the buck sign has exploded. I mean,
As far
exploded.
as scrapes and rubs and
So even though it was warm the last couple of nights, it was obvious they've been on their feet. They've been marking up trees that were not marked up even 3 and 4 days ago, and a lot of fresh scrapes that were rained in a day ago that were freshened up last night. And so I think things are really fixing to pop here. And historically speaking, no reason they shouldn't. It's just going to be pick the days you take off this time of year. You know when you know your area, you know when the bucks are really doing their thing and making and the best chance you have of catching that old deer making a mistake. And so don't burn a good spot on a bad day. Don't go in and hunt a spot with a marginal wind when it's 70 degrees just because the deer should be doing their thing there, because you hate to burn a good spot on a bad day.
So with this upcoming weather, you said, it's been rainy, warm, just unideal conditions. If you had the ability to call in sick, one day this week, what would be those conditions that you would identify and, say, I need to get in there today? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I'm looking for a temperature drop that's, in that 15 to 20 degree range, whether it be in a morning or overnight, the conditions change and you have a temperature drop and you see pressures going up instead of being down in the lower end. If I can get a pressure rise and a temperature drop and all that to go and join up together, that's the day you want to take off. And it doesn't even have to be a major temperature drop as long as it's some sort of event that comes through. It's been rainy, so if we got a clearer, colder day coming up with some high pressure, you better be in the woods.
Yeah, I'd say sounds like as much as you can afford to be in the woods in your neck of the woods, you better be there right now. As far as tactics, are you changing up anything? There's a question on there, doe estrus. Are you hanging scent wicks? Are you rattling, grunting more this time of year? Moving in on bedding areas? Give us some of your, tried and true techniques that this time of year, if you're struggling or you want to get aggressive, what are you pulling out?
Yeah, so right now, this year is a pretty poor acorn year in my neck of the woods. And, we hunt primarily with acorn trees in mind, along with obviously food plots. This year was really tough on food plots with the lack of rainfall. And so overall, food sources are pretty thin this year. And it's making a lot of your does and just, deer density in general be in places to feed. You wouldn't normally see them right now. Food plots are either non-existent or they've already been browsed down. So I've been using cameras to figure out where my does are at, because they're a little bit more compacted and tight in areas where there is food versus on a good year where they might be a little bit more spread out. So right now I'm seeing sign in the row crop fields where there's leftover residue, from the crop, whether it be beans or corn, where they would usually rather be in a food plot this time of year. We just don't have them because we didn't have the rainfall. Therefore, without acorns in the woods, they're almost forced to go to cutovers where there's native browse, and then the edge of row crop fields where there's residual crop out there. So I'm going to hedge my bet this year on hunting a little bit more open areas during this rut coming up, where I would normally be targeting my late season food plots, that have still got a lot of groceries on them, knowing my does are pouring in there and waiting for the right weather, right conditions. I don't have that this year. So I'm pulling out all the stops and going to row crop fields and big open cutovers where there's high visibility, because that's where the food is. Therefore, that's where the does are going to be. The bucks are got to follow.
So really hunting those doe groups is your strategy here over the next 10
Yeah,
days or so.
for sure, because they're so tight right now. Me and my oldest son sat Friday afternoon and saw 16 does on a row crop field, and the weekend before saw 17 in an adjacent field. That's where they're all at, and they're bunched up. Therefore, when that first doe pops, I've got a pretty good idea where she's going to be at, and I'm going to be, sitting there with a great wind waiting for a buck to come out chasing her.
And I mean, as far as calling strategies or, quote unquote gimmicks or, any of that stuff, are you a believer in the scent wick or, rattling blind grunts? You pulling out any of those stops over the next week?
Hey, I'm definitely a fan of doing a little rattling and a little bit of grunting, especially if things seem slow. I don't love to do a lot of that if I'm on a hardcore food source and there's already deer starting to come in there. because I don't want to booger up a doe that might be smelling right. But if things are slow, I'm not seeing what I want to see. Maybe you're hunting a scrape line in a hardwoods where historically speaking, deer like to run that ridge and things are kind of silent. Yeah, I'm going to make some racket, maybe make a mature buck in there think somebody's intruding and see what comes to visit, you know. So definitely I'm not just a huge fan of scents just because these southern deer are so wary about things. I've had more bad experiences with doe estrus scents than I have good. So I don't tell people not to use them. I typically just don't myself, because for every doe that every buck that seems to want to like the smell, you got three back there in the woods, does blowing at it. So, you know, that's just southern deer though, man. They're super wary and just super jumpy about different scents. So I'm not against using them, but I let people kind of make that decision on their own as far as what they've experienced in their area. But hey, the rattling and the grunting, for sure, this is the time of year when in our area it's going to work.
Right on. Well, Austin, I appreciate the report from Northern Alabama, Southern Tennessee. Best of luck as you get into the woods over the next week, pulling for you to stick one.
Thanks. Y'all shoot straight.
All right. Thanks, Austin. Mr. Jeff Lindsay, how are you doing tonight, buddy? No, you're on mute.
I'm good. How you doing, man?
Now we go. I'm doing well. So I saw that you were recently in Kansas and found some success there.
Yes.
So I'll definitely want some recap on that. But I know you're a Georgia guy. You have some ground in Georgia. I assume somewhere in the South might be your next destination. So kind of give us what you've been doing the last couple of days as far as activity you saw up there in Kansas. What you're going to be doing over the next few days, and kind of, you know, some of the historical data that you've seen and what you think is on the horizon for your area. And of course, give us some 411 on where you're at.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm in Georgia now. I just got back from Kansas. We had a couple of, we hunted out there 4 days. We're planning on hunting out there about 6 or 7 days or whatever it took, you know, because this time of year it can be hit or miss a little bit with the weather. But it's one of my favorite times to hunt Kansas. It just so happens to hit in the rifle season with the tail end of the rut. You got a lot of deer that still got a lot of rut left in them, and the ones that don't are, you know, they're in this rebuild mode. The traditional rut, like what we have in Georgia, Iowa, Kansas, whatever, that, you know, all November through Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving ends, they hit the feed hard. And that's kind of what they were doing out there. The buck I killed, I spotted him, I believe it was Saturday morning. I was like, this is deer I want to kill. Saturday evening, I went and I watched him, you know, like 30, 45 minutes after daylight, go to bed or in the grass. I thought he would come right back out in this alfalfa field. He never showed. The next morning, I just kind of came up over the little river dike there and seen him out in the field. He's locked down with a doe. That explained to me why I didn't see him the night before. He found a doe sometime between Saturday morning and that night, and he was with her. And then I shot him off the ground 60 yards. It was an awesome hunt, one of the best hunts of my life. And then
that's awesome.
That afternoon, my buddy, I filmed him shoot a doe, and I shoot a buck, and he was with a doe, came out with a doe, went back in, found another doe. But he eventually came out to eat, and he shot him. Another one of my buddies shot the same night. So we killed 3 on Sunday. But those 2 were really just concentrating on food. So it was a lot of fun, and we tagged out in one day.
Well, that's sweet, man. It's crazy how quick that, you know, they can find a doe and they get locked down, and, you know, snap of a finger, they're back up on their feet. So just shows you got to be in the woods to kill one.
Yeah, and there's a lot of deer out there on that farm right there. We got limited doe tags, and that ecosystem is kind of not traditionally a lot of deer in that area. But right there on the Arkansas River, we got a lot of grass. We got great habitat. So we have a ton of deer, which is it's a good and a bad thing. For the bucks, it makes for a little longer rut because there's so many does to breed, you know, and they'll have a second rut here shortly too.
Right on. So in Georgia there, what general realm in Georgia are you at?
I'm in west central Georgia, and pretty much the whole state has you only have to go about 30 to 40 miles west of here to get in the black belt of Alabama, and then you're dealing with the January, late January, almost February rut. We don't see that here. It's almost this distinct line where it hits about from the Georgia to Alabama line. It's crazy how that works. All our deer in Georgia were imported from Wisconsin, or majority of our deer. So we have that Midwest typical rut down here. And, my son shot a deer Thanksgiving week, and that's typically, and he was chasing the doe, and that's typically when our rut kind of just fades out. But I've always said this first 10 days of December, for just killing a mature buck in Georgia, if he's still alive, you can't beat it, because you can find a food source and it's deadly.
Okay, so that's really your focus here over the next, few days to a week in Georgia, is just hunting food. As far as, I assume, I know you guys have a bunch of food plots. Are you hunting any row crops? Are you, trying to find hot acorns, persimmons? What's your go-to?
Yeah, our persimmons are done. Our acorns are pretty much done. We still got a few of the smaller acorns that are different trees are dropping, but pretty much just food plots. Down here we'll have some food plots, and we've had extremely dry weather. I think Austin touched on the dry summer the South has had. So our food plots are, probably, 30-40% of what they usually are every year. So, but we're still going to concentrate on this because we're not hunting a lot of mornings. Typically late season for me, mornings is it's just kind of, you do more damage than good, in my opinion. But we will I'm going to Arkansas this weekend. Their rut's kind of just getting cranked up, and hopefully maybe one weekend before now in the new year, I'll get to Mississippi, and their rut is typically right around Christmas. I know we got some guys touching on Mississippi later, but that's my rutting action in the South will pretty much be limited to Arkansas and Mississippi the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so that Arkansas realm you're headed to, is that somewhere that you've had some experience hunting in the past?
I have not, so it's kind of like a duck club I'm in, but it's got a lot of row crop. We planted some biologic seed there. I sent them some. I wasn't able to do it, but and it's one of those that it hasn't got hunted a lot. It's not really set up for. It's been managed, I guess, for a long time. People are not just shooting. If it's brown, it's down. But
Yep.
I don't really know what I'm getting to. I've had some cameras out there all year, and some guys have killed a couple of nice deer. And I don't know how much time I'll really get to hunt this weekend, but if I can hunt an afternoon or two, that'll be great.
So I'm guessing you're somewhere in the Delta. Yeah,
Northeast Colorado. Yep, absolutely.
So, couple questions.
Northeast Arkansas. What did I say? Colorado.
We knew what you were talking.
Late at night.
So a couple questions I'm going to ask you. You hunt, deer as much as anybody across the country, all throughout the rut and throughout the country. So, Kobe Miller asks, mature bucks, are they still going to work scrapes, during the peak of the rut, rub lines? Like, do you find that to be a worthy strategy during peak rut, hunting that, fresh sign, or are you seeking elsewhere?
Yeah, in the rut, I'm typically trying to just hunt, really close to bedding areas or funnels, connecting bedding areas or field edges that pinch down that a buck may cut a corner, inside corner, something like that. Typically, what I've always seen on scrapes, even in the South or the Midwest, they're gonna hit them hard, pre-rut, and then as you start to get the heat of rut, when most of the does are in estrus, it's mainly going to be little bucks and does coming in the scrapes. Then when that main part of the rut's out, some of your bigger bucks are going to start checking back in, and they'll check back in on those scrapes, till the end of season, till the first of the year, what we've typically seen. So, but I'm not necessarily hunting scrapes, but if I'm running cell cameras or running my regular cameras that I'm checking, every few days, they're on scrapes, because that's going to tell me what deer are in the area looking, and or if a deer's, without a doe or with a doe, and just checking cameras as much as you can. It's, to us, I feel like our biggest advantage, not only to know what stage of the rut you're at, but what deer are alive and what deer we choose to go after and hunt. Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense. And so some of these folks are, there's one about the peak rut, if you had to choose to take your days off, would you rather hunt, somewhere in the week leading up to peak rut dates, or would you be seeking that chasing phase and hunt that peak rut date?
If I had a crystal ball and I could look at the weather, I would love that right before the pre-rut, right before the bucks really get locked down. You cannot go wrong with that if the weather is good. But because you can't, if you're having to ask off for a week or two in advance, you can't predict that. Now, if it's something where you can just, hey, take a day or two off, hunt those cold fronts. But if it's setting it in advance. This is what I have to hunt. I got to plan it, 2-3 weeks in advance or 6 months, whatever. I'm going to hunt the peak of the rut because no matter what the weather is, it could be 80 degrees, 90 degrees, whatever. And the movement may be a little more limited, but they still got to get after it.
Yeah, no, they only got so much time.
Mm-hmm.
One other question that I'm going to ask you, because I know you've done it some, decoys. Do you touch a decoy with a 30-foot pole anywhere in the South?
Yes, we have had a little bit of success. It's different in the South. In the Midwest, we can put out our Dave Smith and, the deer will come out and does will kind of chill out. In the South, I'm not going to go somewhere where I think I'm going to see, 8, 10, 15 deer or something or unless I'm on the other side of the field, because they're just in the South, they're just not as forgiving, that's just not going to happen. So it's just like the ground blind analogy. I can go put a ground blind out in the Midwest and in 2 days, a deer will come almost walk within 5 foot of it. I need to put that same ground blind out in Georgia, about 2 months prior to when I want to hunt it. So decoys, you got to pick your spots a little more.
Right on. All right. Last question for you, Jeff, and then we're going to hop over to Rusty and see what he's seeing in Mississippi. Chasing a particular buck, you have one hit list buck that you want to put your tag on. Any particular past successes or strategies that you've found to getting it done on that particular buck during the peak rut? I know so often targeting a particular buck during that time period is really difficult. How have you found success doing that?
Yeah, targeting one particular buck is the most frustrating thing in the world to do, especially in the rut, but it's also the most rewarding thing to do. So, that's, some people just want to go out, they want to shoot the first mature deer they see and be done with it. Some people want to pick out that one buck, especially if it's a really big one. And I understand that, but you just have to, I like to look at trail cam history. And when I talk about history, I'm talking about years prior. If it's a 5, 6, 7-year-old deer that you have a ton of history with, I'll start going back, and I did that on the buck I shot in Iowa this year. I'm going back to years prior, and I'm looking at these dates that I got coming up, and I'm checking all the cams in his area, and I'm saying, where was he at last year? He's not going to be there down to the exact same hour, but I have found that certain deer, even if it's on a 200 or 300 acre farm, they'll move to the other side, they'll rut there, and you got to pay attention to that, because you don't want to be hunting where he's been all summer if he's going to the other side of the farm where he has a doe group that he's in love with, or just he knows a doe or two's coming into estrus earlier. The same that she does that every year. So trail cam history to me, and I'm not talking about 1 or 2 years. Go back to when you first knew that buck, what you thought he was, and man, that is just something that has proven itself over and over. And I don't care if that's Georgia, Iowa, Mississippi, Kansas, whatever. You just see that so often.
So you're saying you got a daylight picture of a buck on December 10th and 13th. You're hunting that general zone that entire week this year, hoping to catch him.
Yeah, where he's typically been. Deer are creatures of habit, and they have their rut areas. And for whatever reason, I know there's been different studies and everybody's got opinions on that. But yes, I'm concentrating on what I call his core rut area.
Right on. Well, Jeff, appreciate the time, man. Feel free to hop off and get some well-earned rest before chasing your next one. Appreciate the report, and best of luck as you hunt some Georgia and head up to Arkansas. All
right. Thanks a lot, man. Take care, guys.
Appreciate it. Rusty, how are we doing, man?
What's up, dude? How are you?
I'm doing well over here in Texas. I'm enjoying the heat wave as compared to the single digits I had in Montana when I left. So
I hear you.
Give the folks a 411 on kind of where you're at, what you're seeing as far as rut activity. I know you and your boys have been out a bunch over the last couple of weeks, and kind of what you're anticipating coming up here for the next, week or so.
Yeah. So Mississippi, from what I've seen, we're right on the verge. I mean, scrapes are everywhere. Bucks are opening them up. They're visiting them regularly. And then, we're seeing the small bucks moving around. We're seeing them come into food plots, little basket racks, little 2-year-old deer, spikes, you name it. And they're hitting scrapes, they're hitting licking branches. And it's just a matter of time for it really bust wide open. It's a good time right now to kind of be doing some inventory. Jeff mentioned trail cameras on scrapes. That's what I'm doing right now, figuring out what bucks are where and kind of what their home ranges are. And then, from then on, they're going to be finding those first estrus does, and it's pretty much just a wild card situation from there.
So with where you're hunting in Mississippi, it sounds like you guys are kind of like right at the end of your pre-rut. So given that, are you focusing on scrapes right now? Are you now transitioning to some of that doe bedding that Austin was talking about a little bit earlier? What are, if you were hunting tomorrow in Mississippi there, and give us a general realm of where you're at in Mississippi, because I just know there's so much fluctuation within that state. What are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm in Northeast Mississippi, up. I hunt Clay County, same county home office Mossy Oaks in. And for me, if I'm going tomorrow in the morning, I'm going to be in an area where there's scrapes, whether that's an SMZ between two pine thickets or whatever. Now, when I speak about where I hunt, I mean, a lot of where I hunt is very, very, very thick. And we have these, stream management zones, where there's, it may be only 50 yards wide, a little small creek or a branch running down through between pine plantations and thickets, different age structure of pines, which is obviously, ideal bedding area for deer. But these bucks travel those SMZs in the South. I mean, like clockwork. You can spend a lot of time in there, and they scrape them up. They rub them up big time.
SMZ, give me, I'm not a traditional from the South, but I'm sure there's some other folks in here that aren't familiar.
So SMZ is stream management zone. So when the loggers go in and log, they leave the hardwood timber on the edges of the creeks and the streams to be able to prevent erosion. They're not going to cut everything right up to the bank, right? So you're going to have some open area in there that you can get in there and hunt, and they're perfect little funnels, little pinch points. Like I say, the deer they travel them like a highway, and they're scraping them up and they're rubbing them. Right now, being early December, I'm going to spend my morning hunts in those areas right there, and I'm looking to find a buck traveling. I'm looking for a buck to come through there and hit scrapes, and just see what does have maybe visited and come down through there. Now in the afternoons, typically, pretty much anywhere in the country, but especially in the South, I'm going to focus on food. And for me specifically, it's green fields, it's biologic. And we are careful how we hunt our green fields. We don't overpressure them. We let the boys, my young sons and the other guys I hunt with, we let the young boys kill a few does early during our youth seasons to kind of, let them have some success and get some meat for the freezers. But then after that, we leave them alone, and we do that on purpose because we want those green fields to be a safe haven for the deer. We want the does to come out there every evening like clockwork and feed. And then it's just a matter of time at that point. If you spend enough time on those green fields with those unpressured does coming like clockwork, he's going to show himself. Okay. Now you may check the trail camera or get a cell camera pic the next day when you hunted there that evening and he came, but he was just a little late, which is typical for the South. But at some point, it's going to be too much for him to handle. He's going to walk out there in the daylight. And that's how we kill a lot of our big deer on our area in the South.
Right on. So if you had to pick the peak rut date or, a date that you've historically found, repeat success, what day is that there, where you're at in Clay County?
Again, for me, it's just historically, and again, Jeff mentioned crystal ball. Obviously, we don't have one.
Yeah.
But I would say December 23rd, that basically that Christmas week, Christmas day or two before Christmas through about New Year's Day or maybe January 2nd or 3rd, that 7, 8, 10 day stretch is usually money. Just to give you an example, sometimes weather won't even affect it. You know that. I mean, if a buck's lovesick, he's going to move around. Prime example, last year it was December 27th. I mean, we were in short sleeves. Anybody that's from Mississippi remembers the week between Christmas and New Year's last year, and it was dang near 80 for a high and muggy. And my oldest son, Wyatt, he was 13 last year. He killed an upper 120s 5-year-old 10-point buck that we had on camera that we were hunting. And he walked right out in a green field in 78-degree weather on December 27th at 4:15 in the afternoon. And he was hunting for does, and he killed him with a bow and arrow. And he just couldn't believe it. He was like, I wasn't confident. And I just told him, you just don't ever know this time of year. You can use your best practices, But the bottom line is, if you're on food, they're going to come look where the doe's frequent, and they're going to frequent those plots because we don't pressure them and blast them up with guns. That's a big tactic that's really helped us.
Awesome. So I'll ask you one more question here, Rusty, then we'll bounce over to Jason Hart here. Kind of a two-part question. I do believe either tonight or tomorrow night is the full moon. And in my experience, I'm not a big moon believer, big moon guy. I'd love to hear your take on the moon. But what I do believe in with the moon, and what I've seen from my own experience, particularly in the Midwest where I'm from, in Wisconsin and Iowa, is when you get that full moon, I typically tend to see more mature buck movement midday. You know, like I make sure I'm in a tree from 10 a.m. till at least 1 p.m. Most times during the peak rut for that scent check, but particularly with the full moon. Do you kind of see that in the South as well, really being there that midday, anything with the moon?
Yeah, it's hit or miss, honestly, in the South or in Mississippi for me, as compared to, hunting Midwestern states that I've done over the years. I'm not going to say I don't pay attention to the moon. I do a little bit, but the bottom line is, I hunt when I've got time to hunt, regardless of where it's at. But there is something to the fact that if it's full and if it's bright at night, you're not going to go wrong giving it a couple of extra hours during the day, middle of the day. At worst, I would just sit longer in the morning, and sit till 11:30 till you get hungry and need to come out and get a sandwich or whatever, and just go back in and make your evening hunt. But there is definitely something to it when it's bright overhead and bright underfoot, or either underfoot, that it definitely affects whitetails movement for sure.
Right on. Well, Rusty, appreciate you checking in. Good luck with you and the boys over the next couple weeks here. Hope to see some big bucks on the ground from you and the rest of the Mossy Oak crew.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. Y'all be
Appreciate
good.
it, Rusty. Jason, how are we doing this evening, man?
Doing fine, Jared. Appreciate you having me on this evening. I am, from what I've been told, I'm here to speak about the Texas rut, which I've just experienced for the last 6 days, but I just got off an airplane. I'm back in my home in the low country of South Carolina. So I woke up 1,355 miles away this morning, further west. And I really, really like this topic. Having grown up in the South Carolina low country, I was much like many other kids and many other folks that are probably on this watching this, and that I as a kid, I read Outdoor Life and Field and Stream and Deer Hunting and North American Whitetail and all of those great magazines. And I remember as a kid there, every year, even to this day, that, Outdoor Life and Field and Stream have the best days to hunt. And with that being said, that's usually, they do that in the, mid or early to mid-November. And that's the case in much of the Northeast and the Midwest, but throughout the South, that's not the case whatsoever. Where, I've been in Texas for, like I said, the last 6 days, and the rut where I was is full speed. I mean, it's
rewind here so a couple things real quick before we get to your Texas rut. We're going to drop a link to the giveaway for some free onX hats right now. So that giveaway is only open for like the next 12 hours. So make sure if you're in this webinar, click that link, fill out the info and get entered. So give us an idea, Jason, on where in Texas you were at. And then, run us through the last 6 days, what you saw, kind of what you anticipate based on, what you saw for the next 5 days there. And then I'd love to hear, your historical take on South Carolina and kind of what you plan to be seeing over the next week there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was hunting south of San Angelo, Texas, which is somewhat West Texas. It's kind of on the borderline of what folks consider the hill country of Texas. And Mossy Oak has been turkey hunting there for years and years and years. And for the last 10 years, Mossy Oak has had a lease on the LeGrand Headwaters Ranch, which is around Sonora. And feel free to Google it, but it's around Sonora, El Dorado, Texas area. That area is just full of hunting leases, a very, very popular place to hunt. And I was speaking to the ranch manager, and I've hunted Texas. I've been fortunate enough being in the hunting industry for 20 plus years. I've gotten to hunt Texas almost every year for the last 20 years, deer hunt Texas. and right now it's prime time. He, speaking to Ernie Kaiser, who was the ranch manager where we were hunting, he typically says this first signs of rut activity start just about time Thanksgiving ends. But yesterday morning, we were in a box blind, we were rattling, we were grunting, we were snort wheezing, and we were rattling bucks in left and right. They were going crazy. They were chasing does. The does were coming to food, and bucks of all sizes were chasing does. So it is right now is the prime time. And if you happen to be going to West Texas, and the rut is different in coastal Texas is a little bit different. The rut takes place a little more around October, if I'm not mistaken, right on the East Texas, but inland Texas, it's hot right now, and we experience everything that happens during a rut, and it was just really, really cool the last few days.
So, I mean, I'm not too far from Abilene, so I couldn't have been overly far from you. And yesterday here, I think the high was 81. So even in those temperatures, you were seeing deer running about. Were you sitting most of the day and seeing prolonged late morning movement, early afternoon movement, or was it really, focused on those diurnal hours still?
I think it's still on the diurnal hours. Yesterday, just to give you an idea, we had a guest from Delaware hunting with us, and we got out at daylight, and deer were moving all morning, and it finally started to slow down, I would say around 9 o'clock, and we were leaving to go have a late breakfast, early lunch. And as we were pulling out of the ranch we were hunting on, we spotted a nice mature buck on the hill. And literally I stopped. I had a rental Suburban and stopped it. And our Mossy Oak cameraman, Owen, and our guest jumped out, ran 100 yards up the hill, did a rattling sequence, moved another 100 yards, did another rattling sequence, and killed a deer. He came right in.
No kidding.
Yeah, so that was around 10:30. And then so yeah, it was, I think the hot weather probably does have an effect on the midday movement. And with that being said, anytime you go to Texas, you're definitely you're aware of rattlesnakes, but this time of year you don't think about them too much. Well, we just about stepped on a rattlesnake on Sunday night as we were coming out. So yes, with that being said, the hot weather also has the snakes out as well.
So were you, and when you were in Texas there, were you still predominantly hunting over feeders?
Yes.
And so like, were the does coming to those feeders?
Absolutely.
That was the idea, still hunting food,
Absolutely.
typical Texas style.
Absolutely. Yes. That's exactly it. And it was, I bet there was just action all around. Deer were running everywhere. And it was, it seemed to me like the bucks were pestering the does. The does were, a lot of the does weren't liking it, but
Not quite
they were running all around you, and not quite receptive. So it tells me that there's still plenty of great hunting, still plenty of great rut activity coming in that part of Texas.
So in Texas there, did you see clear defined ruddy deer sign? Were you seeing scrapes? Were you seeing rubs? You were.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you this much. Not only were we seeing those, we were watching bucks make those.
Okay.
So yesterday we had a buck. He was, I think he was probably 4.5, I would judge by on the hoof. And now in that part of Texas right now, the antlers, they've been going through a major drought, as you probably well know, in that part of Texas. And so the antler quality, when we got down there, we heard about it. And yes, a lot of in the area we were, your typical 4.5, 5.5-year-old deer are going to be, they're usually for the most part 120-inch plus. And a lot of those 4.5-year-old deer were 110, 100. You could tell that they weren't what they are. And they're in Texas, as it happens often, a lot of the antlers were broken off. And we had a 4.5-year-old buck that had his entire left side broke off right below the brow tine. He would have been 130 class 4.5-year-old deer, and he did everything. He was grunting, he was chasing, he was lip curling, he was making scrapes, he was making rubs. It was everything. It was fantastic. It's just really neat to see, and rattling. We rattled that deer to us about 5 times. he would
That's-
come and literally we were in that right. They're just losing their mind right now. And it's really fun to see. And it's, I was making comments that, back home in South Carolina, you would never see rut behavior like that. So Texas is a special place, and antler rattling, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much was that's where it became popular for the most part. It was neat to see it work yesterday.
That's awesome. So I want you to quickly touch on South Carolina before we hop down to trade Cade Trickey, who's coming out of Arkansas. From your historical experience in South Carolina there, what does the next week look like? And what strategies are you employing down in your home area?
So right now, the rut is long gone here in South Carolina. Where I'm sitting, 20 yards from where I'm actually sitting right now, I had scrapes 20 yards from me right now the last week of September. So typically right where I am in the low country of South Carolina, you start seeing rut behavior in late September into October. And it's always, at least with the exception of extremely well managed properties with a closer buck to doe ratio 1-to-1, what you'll typically find is a trickle rut, as you'll have rut behavior starting in September, October, a little bit into November, but as of right now, it's definitely a screeching halt, at least from what I'm seeing and from what I'm seeing on my game cameras. So right now it's just 100% hunting over food sources. Now, as you go further north here in the state, we almost have 3 different areas of a rut, and South Carolina is the only state that the state agency never relocated deer from other states. So our genetics here in South Carolina are the most purebred. Now, you go one state over into the state of Georgia, the deer tend to have a lot bigger antlers because they have the Wisconsin genetics and Michigan genetics and other genetics. So, but here in the state, there's basically 3 distinct ruts: the low country, the lower 11 coastal plain areas, like I said, the early October area, and then as you get further north in the state towards the Blue Ridge Mountains, Piedmont, you have a more normal November rut. And then in the very, very top of the state, which is a very mountainous region in the Blue Ridge Mountains, you'll have rut behavior into December up there, which goes across that line in North Georgia and into Alabama. So, I encourage folks that if you are not from the southern region, before you book a hunt or take a hunt, definitely do your research on when the rut does take place in states from South Carolina to Texas, because it's very different than what if you're from the Midwest, from the north, or from the west, of what you'll traditionally see. And every state's different, just based on the stocking and the genetic makeup of your deer herd. And in particular, some states have a cornucopia of genetics from restocking efforts.
Yeah, and if you folks are interested in seeing a very interactive showing of those peak rut dates, if you go into your onX Hunt app, into your map layers, there's a wildlife layers folder, and we worked with the National Deer Association as well as state biologists across the Southeast there to put that together to show those peak rut dates. And honestly, like when you look at Mississippi and Alabama, like it's just pure chaos when the rut is.
It really is. It really is. And I find in all my travels, I've been fortunate, my career to travel everywhere. And when I talk about the rut in different places of, describing what it's like in Mississippi or Alabama versus South Carolina, it blows people's minds. People have a tough time understanding that, our rut here, it can be 95 degrees and mosquitoes. And then, I have a lot of friends where I turkey hunt in South Florida, and the deer in South Florida, they begin rutting in July down there. So the South is a mixed bag. You can have rut behavior in the Southeast anywhere from, and even in just the state of Florida, anywhere from late to July into December. So it's definitely different than areas that have the traditional summer, fall, winter, and spring seasons. In areas like this where it's 70 degrees outside right now in December, the ruts are definitely very different where in these lower latitudes.
Well, Jason, I know I appreciate you coming on here, and like you, I'm looking forward to turkey season. And I had some Rios not too far from my blind this morning, just hammering on the roost, and it had
Fantastic.
me fired up. So I appreciate you
Fantastic.
hopping on.
Hey, Jared, we really appreciate everything that onX is doing.
Hey, thank you, Jason.
Take care.
Mr. Cade Tricky, how are you, man?
What's going on, man? I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Appreciate you hopping on. So give us the 411. It's my understanding that you're pushing 40 days in a tree stand so far this year throughout the state of Arkansas. So kind of give us general realm of where you're hunting. Are you hunting public, private? Give us kind of the 411 of what you've been doing.
Yeah, I don't have the luxury of hunting much private ground. Most of my stuff is public. And unfortunately, most of the days that I've spent this year have been in the early season. With waterfowl season starting off, it's kind of pulling me in a lot of different directions this time of year. So I haven't got to spend as much time in a tree these past couple of weeks like I ought to be. But man, most of my season has been throughout the end of September and October and the first week of November. And most of the sign, most of the success that I've seen, obviously just hunting over food source, which for me, contrary to what everybody else has been saying, we've actually, from what I've seen, had a pretty good acorn year this year. Good mass crop in the bottoms where I live. So I actually live right where the bottoms meet the hills. So I kind of hunt public on both sides of that, hunting in the hills and in the bottoms. Most of my stuff in the bottoms, it's super hard to pin down bedding areas in the big timber tracks that we've got. It's a lot of monotonous timber that's all the same thing. Really hard to pin down where they're going to be bedded at, because really they could lay down anywhere. So mainly focusing on food sources in the bottoms, and then in the hills, a lot of it's pine country. So I'm hunting kind of like he was talking about in the bottoms of the creek bottoms, where the hardwood stretches are meeting the pine hills, and hunting in those funnels. Had a lot of good sign, got a lot of good luck there in the bottoms in the hardwoods. But yeah,
Really focusing on those transition areas, that habitat diversity, makes a heck of a lot of sense. We're going to post the giveaway link again here for the last time, so make sure you fill that out. And Cade, so being a native to Arkansas, am I correct in that?
yes, sir.
When are you typically expecting your peak rut dates to be, over the course of your lifetime hunting deer there? And is that coming up? Is it past? What are we looking at?
Man, to be honest, in my experience, I've always done really well that week of Thanksgiving. That's probably because that's when our gun season opens, so we hunt a lot more that week. But in my experience, Thanksgiving, the week of Thanksgiving and the week after Thanksgiving has always been really well. From my buddies and people that are still deer hunting hard, obviously right now is a great time, especially in South Arkansas. I think the rut is really about to kick in. But like I said, with the nature of my job and what I do, I get pulled in a lot of different directions once waterfowl starts. So don't get to spend as much time in the tree in December as like I'd like to. But man, Thanksgiving week has always been really well for me. A lot of good deer hit the ground Thanksgiving week between my family and my buddies this year. But who knows, man? I've always been the type to, if I got time to hunt, I'm going.
So really right now, in your local haunts there, you're kind of looking at a post-rut scenario with what we're hunting currently.
From what I've seen, I have gotten a deer hunt a couple times in the past week or two. And anything can happen at any given time. That's the nature of the beast. But I'd say in my experience where I'm at, we're kind of looking, maybe not quite post-rut, but it seems to have been hotter a couple of weeks ago for me. Yeah.
And so with that, obviously I assume you've hunted some at this time of year between shooting mallards in the timber. On public there, I know you guys in Arkansas there are pretty blessed with a number of vast tracts of public land. When you have that much ground to cover, and as you said, so much of it is monotonous. Of course, you can find some hardwood pine transitions or a creek bottom, but kind of what terrain types or outside of those creek bottoms, are you finding, that secluded bedding stuff, where a mature buck is going to kind of be hiding out and winding down from the rut? Is there any particular land features that you found to be money?
It's tough. It's tough, especially in the big, like you're talking about, the big tracts of timber, especially in the Delta and East Arkansas. But kind of things that I key in on. I mean, duck hunters are obviously a factor because you've got public duck hunting going on in the same woods. So trying to avoid duck hunters is obviously a big thing to get away from the shotguns. But kind of things I focus on is getting as far away as I can. And then this time of year, like early in the season, I was focusing mainly pretty much all of my hunts for white oaks, looking for hot white oaks, and done really well. And now this late in the year, some people may not know this, but even in the bottoms, we still have ridges. They're not anything like a normal ridge you would think of, but maybe only
like a
three.
ditch.
Right. It might only be 3 or 5 feet in elevation, but it's enough that, it seems like most of our red oaks will grow on the tops of those ridges in the bottoms. And this late in the year, it seems like the deer are mainly on red oaks by now, and your smaller acorns. So basically what I'm doing, man, is getting as far away from the truck as I can, getting somewhere where hopefully nobody else has been, especially away from duck hunters. And then trying to find that hot feed tree. And I'm not looking specifically for buck sign. Most of the time, I'm just looking for deer sign, for feeding sign. And if I can find a tree that I feel like deer are eating, within the last 24 hours, I'm going to hunt that feed tree, get on the downwind side of it. And, during the rut, that's kind of worked well for me. It's just getting close to the does. And, he's usually close.
Heck yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you hopping on. I know you're right in the thick of it as far as shooting greenheads. So thanks for
Yes,
dropping some Arkansas deer knowledge. And yeah, appreciate everyone coming out here to kind of get some flavors of different states on what the rut's doing across the South. So best of luck out there to all with tags in their pockets and freezers unfilled. So appreciate you coming out, and best of luck the rest of the fall.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Jared.
Thanks, Cade.